say, like, not like waiting 2, 3, 4 minutes, but like 30 seconds waiting to interact with Caitlyn. And it's just, nope. Nope. And you can see Marina as soon as it happens, if she's pissed. You can see her as soon as Caitlin Clark goes. She's just
That
like,
reaction is the whole mystery. Marina Mabrey seems to wait for Caitlin Clark, while Clark keeps moving. The question is whether this was just a meaningless moment on the court, or whether it tells us something bigger about where this Fever team really stands.
And this is my camera. This is Mick Talks Hoops exclusive footage. This is Mick Talks Hoops exclusive of Caitlin Clark snubbing Marina Mabrey. And I love it. I love to see it because not only has Marina Mabrey hip check Caitlin Clark, and I think Caitlin Clark, if nothing happened in that game,
now,
probably would have.
Look at what the source is actually saying. He says he personally recorded this footage from near the court, and he believes Clark deliberately chose not to interact with Mabrey. That difference is important because the video can show us where people were standing and what they did, but it cannot tell us exactly what Clark was thinking. Still, the body language is interesting enough to raise a bigger question. Why does Indiana seem to be creating such a strong boundary between its own players and everyone outside the team? And there is another detail coming later that makes this more interesting than just one awkward moment. When you compare this moment with how Fever players react when one of their teammates is challenged, the pattern becomes much harder to call random.
Has Marina Mabrey hip check Caitlin Clark, and I think Caitlin Clark, if nothing happened in that game, probably would have acknowledged Marina Mabrey. When Marina Mabrey got into it with Kelsey Mitchell. Like, I genuinely think she got into it with Kelsey Mitchell. I genuinely think that's the reason why Caitlin's like, no, fuck you. Like, no, fuck you. Like, I think a lot of stuff, time heals all lot of situations, and I think Caitlin...
The source connects this moment to earlier tension between Mabrey and Clark and then goes a step further. He believes Clark may care even more when someone gets into a conflict with one of her teammates. Again, that is his interpretation, not something Clark has publicly confirmed here. But from a basketball perspective, the idea makes sense. Rivalries can become different when the conflict is no longer personal. There is a big difference between saying, "You came after me, and I remember it," and saying, "You went after one of my teammates, so now the whole team remembers it." That second mindset can help create a strong team identity. It is not always about friendship. It is about loyalty. And that makes this story more important. The Fever have been under an unusual amount of attention for a long time. Every hard foul, confrontation, handshake, and comment can be pulled apart and debated. If the players respond to that pressure by becoming more private and protective of each other, it would not be surprising. Pressure can break a locker room apart, but it can also bring players closer together and create a bunker mentality. Right now, Indiana increasingly looks like it may be building the second one.
Gone to her teammate and gone to it with her. Because we've seen them interact since the hip check. We saw them interact before the hip check. And we saw what Caitlin said before the game about Marina.
Listen carefully to that difference. The source says Clark and Mabrey still interacted after their earlier physical incident. That makes the idea that Clark completely stopped talking to her after one confrontation much harder to support. If that reading is correct, then this latest moment may not be about an old personal grudge. It could be connected to something that happened more recently around the team. That is a much more interesting possibility because it changes the story from Caitlin Clark versus Marina Mabrey into something bigger, Caitlin Clark reacting as a teammate. You can disagree with the source's interpretation of this specific video and still understand the basketball dynamic behind it. Players remember things. Not every disagreement becomes public, and not every conflict leads to a quote. Sometimes you see it in who helps a teammate off the floor, who defends them after a whistle, who hugs them after a game, and sometimes even who walks past them. None of that proves there is hostility. But these small moments can still give us clues about a team's internal culture.
See the interactions. Now, I don't think outside of... There are very few players that Caitlin Clark's going to react positively with in the league. Like, I'm just trying to think off the top of my head who. Like, Griner, it seems. Even though Griner was hit her in the face a few times. But, like, I think Brittany Griner and Taurasi were, like, the first two real vets in 2024 that kind of went on the attack at Caitlin Clark. So it's like, who? Brittany Griner, Sabrina.
Now the discussion moves beyond Mabrey. The source names several players he believes Clark has a closer relationship with around the league, including Brittany Griner, Diana Taurasi, Sabrina Ionescu, and former teammate Kate Martin. Some of these relationships have clear reasons behind them. Former teammates naturally have a different connection. Olympic teammates can also build strong relationships. Veterans who respected Clark from the beginning may also have a special place in her circle. But this is where people can make a mistake by turning normal competitive distance into a huge league-wide conspiracy. There is no need for that explanation. Professional athletes do not have to be friends with everyone they compete against. The WNBA is a small league, and players often share national teams, off-season leagues, agents, college connections, and friendships. At the same time, competitive boundaries still matter. The Fever do not need every opponent to like them. They need to trust each other. For Clark, this is especially important because she entered the league with enormous attention following her everywhere. Every reaction from an opponent became a story. Every hard foul became a debate. Even a simple handshake could be replayed and analyzed. Under that kind of pressure, it is understandable for her to be selective about who she interacts with. The mistake is assuming that every distant interaction means there is a major personal feud. The more useful question is whether Clark and Indiana now have a clearer internal rule: respect our teammates and the competition stays competitive, but if you cross that line, the relationship may change.
Well and truly is the case where it's like, Caitlin Clark is outside of those couple. Caitlin Clark is, look, no, it's you're either on my team or you're against me. You're either on my team or you're against me here. But yeah, look, it's overall just a situation where she seems to go on the list. Yeah, you're all former teammates. You're right. You're not wrong. And ex-Fever players. Yeah. Absolutely. But
that phrase, "you're around my team or you're against me," is the source's interpretation, not a direct quote from Caitlin Clark. But it captures the attitude he believes he is seeing. This is what makes the Fever situation so interesting. In women's basketball, people often talk about sisterhood and the relationships players build through college, national teams, and years in the league. Those relationships are real, but they are not universal. Indiana does not seem interested in acting friendly just because everyone plays in the same league. From the outside, that can look cold, but in competitive sports, it can actually be useful. Think about how easily teams can lose their edge when players know each other well. Before games, they talk, laugh, and hug former teammates. Then the game starts, and they have to switch into competition mode. Some players are very good at making that change. Others struggle with it. A team that agrees, "we can be friendly later, but right now these players are trying to beat us," removes some of that confusion. And in high-level competition, that clarity can be valuable. The toughest teams often have clear emotional boundaries. Indiana may be learning that team unity does not require approval from the entire league. Sometimes, unity can become even stronger when the team focuses on protecting its own group.
No quote-unquote sisterhood from Caitlin Clark or this Fever team. That does not exist. You even saw in the Aces game when the Fever beat the Aces, where they had AJ in the South Carolina picture, how far away AJ Wilson and Leah Boston were from each other. Like, it is well and truly a case where the WNBA, like, everyone knows where it's like, oh yeah, you know, the alumni from the Yukon Mafia will all stick together. And you've got Aaliyah Boston essentially being like, yeah.
This is the first real payoff because the source brings Aaliyah Boston into the discussion and shows how Fever players can separate old relationships from current competition. That matters more than whether Clark exchanged a few words with Mabrey near the court. Boston has connections throughout the basketball world, and so does Clark. Almost every experienced WNBA player has friendships and relationships across the league. But once Indiana puts on the same uniform, the important question is whether those outside relationships become less important than what happens inside the team. That is where strong team chemistry is built. It is not about pretending everyone is best friends, and it is not about creating fake hostility. It is about making the priority clear: teammates come first. This is especially important for Indiana because the Fever receives so much attention. People constantly try to interpret every small interaction. A frustrated look can become a feud. A coach's comment can become a story about a divided locker room. Even where a player stands during a timeout can be treated as evidence of tension. The best way to deal with that pressure is for the players to know exactly where they stand with each other. If Clark knows Boston will support her, and Boston knows Clark will support her, that creates trust. If Kelsey Mitchell knows the same thing, and the rest of the team follows that standard, outside noise becomes much less important. That is the real value of an US versus everybody mentality when it is handled properly. It does not make a player shoot better or magically improve the defense. What it can do is reduce hesitation. And in a league where one possession can decide a game, that can make a real difference.
Players, because let's be real, there is a mental edge that an A'ja Wilson has over her opponents that are too friendly with her. Because A'ja Wilson's a killer. She is. She is a killer. Like you hear all this stuff like about like her before the game with her and Alicia Gray. She seems to be able to get in the heads of these players that are too friendly with her, and oh my God, it's A'ja Wilson, and she's herself is a killer on the floor. The problem is
now
that
the source brings A'ja Wilson into the discussion, and this is where the basketball psychology becomes more interesting. His argument is that Wilson has a mental advantage because she is not only one of the most dominant players in the league, but she also has a lot of respect and status among her peers. That point needs some caution. We cannot know from this transcript exactly how much an opponent is affected by a personal relationship with Wilson. But the bigger idea is real in sports. Reputation can influence how people play. When you face a player with years of elite performances, major awards, and a history of controlling games, you are not just facing the player on the court. You are also facing everything you already believe about that player. That is why teams celebrate so much when they finally beat a dominant opponent. They are not just beating that team on that night. They are also breaking the expectation that the opponent was supposed to win. This is where being outside the league's social circle could actually help Indiana. If the Fever do not enter games feeling intimidated by the players across from them, they remove one part of the challenge. Respect Wilson's ability, absolutely. But allowing her reputation to make you give up mentally before the game even starts would be a mistake. There is a big difference between respecting greatness and being afraid of greatness. Respect helps you prepare. Fear can make you passive. The Fever need the first and cannot afford the second, and if that is what this footage represents, opponents should care less about whether Caitlin stopped for a conversation and more about what happens the next time somebody challenges one of her teammates. Because the strongest version of the Fever is not Clark fighting everyone else's battles by herself. It is the Fever treating every teammate's battle like their own. So what do you think? Was this just an ordinary courtside walk-by that fans are reading too much into? Or did we see another small sign that Caitlin Clark and Indiana have developed a real us-against-everybody edge? Drop your opinion in the comments. And if you want more Fever breakdowns based on the actual footage instead of just the noise around it, like the video and subscribe.